Okay, well, thank you so much for this. We're going to give it a few minutes before we start. For all those of you who are joining, thank you for joining us this morning. Hey, Justin, nice to have you around. Goran, George, thank you for joining. Luisa, Luisa seems to be having trouble connecting. Maybe you can give her some advice through the chat. Thank you, Maria and Mike, for joining. We'd love to have you all join us here. We'll be starting, we're going to do a Facebook Live transmission of this video call for the first part of our conversation. So in this first part, we thank you. If you guys can just keep your cameras off for the first part of the conversation. Afterwards, we'll invite you to turn it on. Christina, thank you for joining. Lovely to have you here. I'm very honored that you've all decided to join. So for now, I'm going to mute your microphones in the first part. And we'll start transmission in a few seconds. I'd be very grateful if you can take off your camera, Christina, just for this first part of the interview as we're transmitting it, so that we can see how that goes. Michal, thank you for joining. There comes Ray. So there's a ton of people who are joining the call, and that's cool. Excellent. Hi, MJ. Thank you for joining.
Good morning.
Good morning. Lovely to have you here. This is fantastic. Michal and Christina, I'm going to ask you if you can take off your cameras just for the first part of the interview. We'll be very grateful. Hello, MJ. Also nice to have you here. Thank you. You can turn off your cameras at the bottom of the screen. This is going to be fun because it's going to be like a dance of a camera dance. Lovely. Okay, so we're going to give it a couple of minutes before we start. And we are excited about this. So if any of you have technical issues or whatever, you can write on the chat. The chat, you can find it at the top left side. You can click the button of the little person there, and there you can find the chat. Michal, your camera hasn't been able to go off. If you can try and take it off again. There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Now we're live.
And we are live. So, good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us on this fantastic video call and conversation that we're having today here from SOLE Colombia. We are a team of enthusiasts who's excited about transforming the future of learning here in Colombia, and we do it through SOLE. Instead of me telling you more about that, today we are very happy to have our mentors, our great grandmothers, our teachers, our inspirers with us. We have, before I introduce them, I would like to introduce my colleague, Belen, who's here with us. Say hello, Belen.
Hello, everybody.
Belen is joining us from Madrid, Spain, and I'm here in Bogota, Colombia. And behind the scenes, we also have two of our awesome colleagues who are helping us have this transmission go. Annie is joining us also from Bogota, and we also have Liz from Bogota who's helping us. Whoever, if you have any technical issues, whatever, with the call, please write in the chat, and Annie will be, and Liz will be there to help you out. So I'm going to dive into this and say hello to Sugata, hello to Suneeta. Thank you for joining us today. It would be awesome for those of us who don't know you. I've known you for a long time now, and you've known me for a long time now. Please tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about each one. Sugata, tell us a little bit about SOLE, and Suneeta, tell us a bit about the Granny Cloud to introduce everybody into our conversation today. So please go ahead, Sugata, go ahead.
Okay, well, thanks for organizing this, Sanjay. And I'd like to thank all the participants. I see there are many and from many different countries. But my name is Sugata Mitra, and I'm retired. I used to work for Newcastle University in England, and I live near the university now. Um, I have been working with children's education for many years. I guess more than, I don't know, 25 years or something like that. And in that time, I noticed a few things, which is what I think all of us should keep in mind. The first thing is that children don't need to be taught how to use a computer. Okay, I think that's kind of obvious to anyone. Anyone who has seen a 3-year-old with an iPad knows that. So, okay, we don't need to teach them how to use a computer. What do they do? Well, they play games. Most of their parents think that they waste time all the time. But I have had the occasion to actually observe what is it that they do. And yes, they do play a lot of games and so on and so forth. They chat with each other. But when they run into a question, then instead of asking other people, which is what I used to do when I was a child, this generation with the internet first goes looking for the answer on the internet. And I found, to my surprise, and all of this is actually published, that they do find the right answers. So you would wonder, how did they manage to understand the language? How did they, actually understand anything? So to cut the long story short, what I found was that children learn not only how to use a computer, but when they're working in groups, they also learn how to search effectively, how to figure out what is wrong and what is right. And in fact, in a group, they stop each other from wasting time. One child will say to another one, well, get back to what we were looking for, that sort of thing. Having found what they're looking for, they're able to understand. Now you might wonder, how would that happen? Well, it doesn't happen alone. And I can't stress that enough. It doesn't happen alone. It happens in a group. A group understands better than an individual does. And I'm sure many of you actually know that. Once they've found an answer and once they've understood it, if you then ask them to answer the question and tell you about it, they learn how to communicate. So they learn 3 things. They learn to search, to use a computer. They learn computing. They learn comprehension, how to ask a question and understand the answer. And very importantly, they learn how to communicate, how to tell that answer to somebody else. So this whole process of a group of children looking for the answer to a question is called a self-organized learning environment, for obvious reasons. It's self-organized because they're not supervised. It's learning because they will tell you things that they did not know before. And it's an environment because, there's one internet connection, there are a group of children, and they have organized themselves to use that resource. All of this is important, okay? One internet connection, a group of children, a question, and their ability to compute, comprehend, and to communicate. So that's about enough. And Sanjay, if I talk too much, please stop me.
So I can't stop you because I always love listening to what you say and how you explain it. So I'm not going to stop you for now. I'm just going to introduce for the people who are arriving to our call now. Thank you for joining us. We have today in our call Sugata Mitra. He's a TED Prize winner from the TED Talks. And we have Suneeta Kulkarni, who's the director of the Granny Cloud. I'm going to ask Luca and Simeon, who you have your camera on, if you can take off your cameras for this part of the conversation. The same to Daniel. Danny, thank you for joining us. If you can take off your camera for this part of the conversation. And I would like to introduce now Suneeta. Suneeta is director of the Granny Cloud. She's been our guide in how to make things happen with connecting remotely to people, and has been a great inspiration. So please go ahead, Suneeta. What is the Granny Cloud? What has it achieved? What could the world look like? So you have to go ahead.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for having me, and it's lovely to be with all of you. The Granny Cloud for me was a very kind of a natural move on from what I'd been doing prior to that, which was with early childhood education, special needs education, and in any case, disadvantaged settings. So. The Granny Cloud itself, of course, emerged from observations of the children in disadvantaged situations. And out of that, I think some of the key things were that they weren't as familiar with the technology, including computers. They hadn't used the internet very much. And of course, many of them didn't know any English. So they couldn't quite use the SOLE approach the way it was being used in other places. So, in a way, what we tried to do at the very beginning was to try and simulate a situation in which we could make them more familiar with English, and therefore their ability to use the internet would be enhanced. That was the idea. But, so stories, songs, what have you. But we realized very, very early on that that was just a teeny weeny part of what could actually happen in those sessions between the children and the mediators, or the grannies as the world knows them. And they're not just grannies, they're all ages, both, all genders, everything. But in those interactions, I think the key things that began to happen, and we see that irrespective of whether they happen on WhatsApp groups or in actual sessions, and most of this is online. So pretty much everything is online. So you're provoking curiosity. You're very often a sounding board for what the children are thinking about. You're providing an exposure to things that children might not otherwise have access to. That's a big part of it. And one of the other things that we noticed also very early on is that the raising of the children's self-confidence, and that would happen so quickly that in many cases we never even had a chance to measure it, because before you could actually start doing anything formally, you could see the change in the children. And I think that's really the strength of what we do. What we can do, although very often we can't have the really big questions, we have what we sometimes refer to as mini SOLE sessions, which are sometimes small, relatively focused kind of search activities, which allow the children to have a sense of success because they get to an answer that even they recognize that they've reached some kind of sensible solution. And then gradually they become more adept at handling bigger questions. But what I think has changed in the last 10 odd years is that there is so much more material available in so many other languages other than English. And that has changed the way things happen and the way children search for information. It's also, by the way, one of the key reasons why I was so thrilled when SOLE Colombia got in touch and said, we'd like to do granny sessions in Spanish. And I'm hoping that we're going to hear some more about that in a while. I'd love to see all children have access to some kind of Granny Cloud. It seems to do wonders in many different ways. But the one that exists, I really see just as a model, as a possibility of what can happen. And if anyone across the world wishes to use it, we'll be more than happy to offer our experience and our suggestions and take it from there. So that's in a nutshell.
Lovely, Suneeta. So this is the moment in this wonderful call in which we're going to trade places. So usually, no, it's we call you Sugata and we call you Suneeta and we say, hey, let's talk to us about this. And I'm the one who's asking questions, and Belen is the one who's asking questions. So today we decided that we're trading places, and we're trading places in the sense that, well, you always get asked questions and you're the ones who have to talk. Today, we thought maybe it would be fun if this time you guys are the ones who ask us questions. We've always learned so much from you guys, and in the 7 years that we've been doing SOLE here in Colombia, we've always had many more questions to ask. It's always like, take me further, and the call finished, so where are we going to leave it there? So today we're going to just trade places, and we are going to suggest that you are the guys who interview us. So this is the moment where I get to shut up and let you guys take the stage and you guys lead this conversation. So just a little recommendation. Danny, we see you on the screen. If you can take off your camera, that would be awesome because we're transmitting this live through Facebook for this first part. Thank you. All right, so the stage is yours.
Well, thanks. Sanjay, you will need to, tell us who has to speak first, because otherwise
No,
both
no,
of
come
us
on.
will start speaking.
You're older.
simultaneously.
You go first.
I didn't say anything. Suneeta is the one who said it. Please go ahead, Sugat. I'm not going to give you self-organize.
Well, let me take you back a few years. I don't even remember how many years, but the first time that I went to Colombia, I was in South America. I think I was in Argentina, and I flew into Colombia, and I met Sanjay, who had organized a very large number of meetings for me. And they started from early in the morning and they went on till late in the evening. And in every meeting, we talked about very, very important things, which Greta Thunberg sometimes refers to as blah blah blah. So that didn't help much. So I was then wondering, what else is Sanjay going to do? Well, finally, at the end of it, he said, I've got the idea of what a soul is, so why don't you do one? And he took me to, I think it was a public library of some kind, and there were a lot of children there. And I made a soul. I took a few computers, I took some children, always take very few computers, one computer for every 4 or 5 children, gave them the question, it all worked out just fine. It's now in retrospect that I realize that that was probably the very first soul done in Colombia. And I came back from Colombia after eating that delicious food. And then I thought, well, let's see what happens. But I didn't quite understand Sanjay. I thought that, he's going to say, okay, successful visit and so on. But he didn't do that. He actually started to spread souls around the country. So my question to you, Sanjay, is what happened next?
Thank you, Sugata. Well, I hate to break it to you this way, but you weren't the first one to do a soul here. We had actually already started piloting it. So with a couple of friends, Felipe and Juan Pablo, I don't know if you remember it, Adriana, we actually started doing soul a few months before. And it was because Felipe had met you when you won the TED Prize back in LA, I think it was. And he saw that idea of the souls, and he knew that here in Colombia, he lived in a rural part outside of Bogota, and he went and tested it in a rural school, because here in Colombia, the government had put computers and internet in many, many public spaces around Colombia. And he said, wow, this looks like a good strategy. And he called me and said, why don't we try and convince the government to do this large scale? So actually, a few months before you arrived here, that you came in January of 2015, in 2014, at the end of 2014, we actually did a pilot and we went to 20 places. We went to 10 public libraries and we went to 10 internet kiosks, like public internet kiosks. Imagine like an internet cafe. And we started doing soul there just based on your soul toolkit and having seen your TED Talks and so on. And that's when we realized the power of this, because this was a beautiful occasion to get people to use these public spaces with computers. Basically, people didn't know what they were for. People thought internet was just Facebook. And so this was like, hey, why don't we bring people together and to ask questions? So that was when we started really thinking of what power this could have. And basically, just so you know, there's over 1,500 public libraries throughout the whole country, but then there's around 10,000 kiosks, internet kiosks, and then there's like 40,000 schools which have computers. Some of them, half of them have internet, half of them don't. And usually the internet is just for the administrative part, not like for the adults. They don't let the kids use the internet. So anyway, what we thought is, what if we go to these places and show the owner of the computer room key how to turn that into a SOLE, how to turn that into a self-organized learning environment. And that's how, after piloting in 2014, what we did was scale this to like 300 places. We went to 200 schools, we went to 100 of these internet kiosks, and the Ministry of Culture actually scaled it in the 1,500 public libraries. We showed them how to do it. Basically, what we did was we invented a way of training. It was more like inspiring the owners of these spaces with computers on how to turn that into a SOLE. And we gave them a toolkit, which I remember you saw and you thought, what happens if you just give this to the kids? Well, we did that toolkit basically because most of these public spaces were really ugly. No, the computer room in schools is usually the last room, the ugliest, and the computers are like tied up to the wall with wire so that nobody steals them and stuff like that. So we actually made a toolkit which had signs like that and which had like a big question sign and so on, which would allow the place to look nicer and to make it like, well, more interesting. And that's how we started scaling SOLE. And that's how we started getting in touch with other NGOs, with other nonprofits, with other private companies to scale it throughout the whole country. And that's how in the last 7 years, we've reached over 420,000 people. And we don't know them, but we know that we've trained other people so that they can show other people how to do it. And all our work has always been trying to figure out how we can do that. One interesting and powerful thing that happened was that in 2016 in Colombia, we signed our peace agreement with the FARC. And that was a very big thing for me, and I think for all my colleagues here. We never thought that would happen in our lifetime. No, when I was born into an armed conflict. And I thought, well, that's the way things are, and that's the way things are going to be. This doesn't finish. And when the peace agreement happened, a very powerful thing came up to us, and it was like, I think we need to do something about this, no? Because this is a fragile moment for this country. And we thought, well, it's quicker for the internet to reach these remote areas where there's never been schools or there's never been like public services or something like that. It's quicker that the internet gets there than if the road and they build a school and they send the teachers and everything to make it go there. So we thought SOLE would be an awesome thing to work in these spaces. And one of the interesting things is that as we went to public spaces, it wasn't only for kids. And I think that was one of the things which we we tried to tell you, this also works with adults, no? And then it's amazing because kids go with their parents and go with their grandparents to the public library. And so that's how we started off saying, well, maybe this also works with adults. And we realized it works with adults. It's much slower, no? Kids are quicker, kids are more, but with adults, it also works because we become like kids, basically, when we're in a self-organized learning environment. And that's how we started saying, okay, we need to invent many ways to get there. And so we started to go to these places where ex-combatants had settled, where communities which had just got their first internet connection had small internet kiosks. So we thought this is a great moment for them to learn and to learn how to learn together, create dialogue amongst themselves and figure out what it is they need to do to flourish as a community, basically because we don't know the answers there. And that's when we started inventing also a SOLE lab, no? Because there are some places which don't actually have the public space. So we actually made a SOLE lab in a place here in Bogota with a private company that's the owner of cell phone towers. So we put it in the space of a cell phone tower, like in a lot.
Sanjay froze.
Can't hear Sanjay. I remember those pictures that he sent of the first SOLE lab in the lot.
It was nice. It was beautiful, wasn't it?
Yes.
I wasn't there, but I know that they started with the community and they gave them the key, and then everyone in the community helped building that SOLE lab. And the community were on charge of watering the little plants there and making and doing SOLE there and connecting with grannies, and it was very, very nice. We have a video of that SOLE lab building, that it's available on our website. So if anyone want to see it or watch it, you can click on the link. I will find it for you later on.
Yeah.
Do you think we can move on with the next question?
Belen, in fact, that's what I was just wondering, because you right now you mentioned, and you've been part of the Spanish Granny Club pretty much from the beginning. Mariam used to send all the pictures when they made the first lab and so on. And the Granny Cloud used to function in Bogota and Cartagena and a couple of other places from around 2010 or so. And when we got into this first conversation with Sanjay and Mariam, then they began to talk about, no, we need to have a Spanish Granny Cloud. And obviously that was exciting because, to be able to do it in the children's language itself. But I was wondering if you could share with everyone a little bit about why it was so important to try and get this Spanish Granny Cloud off the ground.
Okay, it was amazing. In fact, I was the first Spanish granny, the flamenca granny, and it was beautiful because, well, I love education and I love kids, and it was I was called by Sanjay and Mariam to start this beautiful project. We actually started with a group of kids in a humble neighborhood in South Bogota. And it was there where we piloted this and allowed for many other volunteers to join in. I was the first, and it was beautiful the first time we connect, because the thing is that with nothing you do everything. No, it's like participating in some beautiful place where kids are searching and making investigations, very, very deep investigations. Apparently they're playing, but they are learning too much, no? And it was beautiful, and all the kids were amazed with that person in the other side of the screen that was in Spain. I was in Spain, so everybody was like, where's Spain? And they were searching for Spain in the computers, and it was very important because actually English is not a common language here. So, well, in Spain and also in Colombia. So we needed a group of people who can participate and like dynamize the thing in the proper language, no? And it was very nice. Sanjay, welcome again. You froze.
Yeah, I was just asking Belen about why the idea of the Spanish Granny Cloud came up, because we'd had sessions in other places, with Laura Costa in having the typical English-speaking grannies chatting with Spanish-speaking children, and Belen was one of the first grannies who had sessions in Spanish with Spanish-speaking children. There were, of course, a lot of challenges, and you probably remember a lot of that as well. So
Yes.
very, very quickly just share some of that to add to what Belen has just said.
So this usually happens. The electricity went away. No, this is like, it never happens. And just when I'm in a call with you, then no, this is what happens in the Granny Cloud, and this is what happens in the SOLE session. It's like suddenly you're gone. No, you're offline, and it's like, why is happening? I don't understand. And then you have to figure it out, and then you realize the light went, and there's no electricity. So I think one of the powerful things that we found also with the Granny Cloud was this idea that in Colombia, people historically have been very isolated. I mean in terms of geographically, but I also think means socially. Like here your classes are very clear, no, the social classes, and here also it's very clear who has access to what, to quality education, who get no public education is poor education, rich education is private education, etc. Probably like in many places around the world. And I always thought like the Granny Cloud was a great opportunity to connect people randomly. No, that's what the internet does. No, it allows us for us to be, no, here we're 25 people in this call. Probably we've never met with some of us. And it's like, this is what the internet does. And we thought, wow, here in a country where people have always felt very lonely, very quiet, very silenced by violence, it would be awesome to have someone to talk to and somebody who listens to you. And so we thought, wow, this Granny Cloud is really like a great idea in which people connect randomly with people who they would otherwise never know, and actually have somebody listen to you and have somebody to share with you 1 hour, no, of your life. And it might never happen again. No, you might never see the same people again, or you might see them constantly and become friends and something like that. But that really shows kind of the power of the internet in connecting people and people, so you don't feel alone, so you don't feel like there's nothing going on. And so what happens in Colombia is that you have like big cities and people are bustling, but in rural areas, some people are really isolated. And when they're really isolated, there's this thing of you have nothing else than what your surrounding gives you. And I think when you tap into the internet and tap into a Granny Cloud, suddenly it's like, oh, the whole world comes in. It's like what I imagine Columbus felt when he found America, no? Or when we will find life on other planets. It's like, wow, there's this whole other world where maybe I can find somebody who understands me, where maybe I can find somebody who challenges me, and where maybe I can find somebody who inspires me, or I don't know. I think there's where that potential is. And I always remember, Suneeta, what you told us in this conversation earlier this year, where you said, yeah, we, in this moment of pandemic, now we are all online, we're all on cameras and all that. We have to remember that what's really important, and what's really important in anything, is human contact, no? And I do think that's the essence behind what we do, no? Like we try to find ways of having human contact, and I feel, for example, SOLE was that great way of finding it, no? It's like bring people randomly together, let them ask questions, let them work together, and see what happens, no? And it's always, but wait, what are you teaching them? What do you want them to? Who cares? Let them figure it out, and let's see where that takes us. And in a country where we've always been told what to do, and I don't know if it's this country, I think it's this planet, where we're always told what to do, where we always have to ask for permission, where we always have to wait for, no, what's the next thing? No, I already went to school, now I need to go to the university, then I need to find a job, then I need to retire. Maybe this is a moment where we can mess things up a little bit, mix things up, and let people figure out other ways of living together. And I think that's what I've found that both SOLE and the Granny Cloud let us do. Let us suggest that to people. And when people feel that, they're like, oh, this is possible. We can do something different. Wow. Okay. Then they start creating their own ways. Go ahead, Sugata.
So, while listening to you, I've got the general idea that of what happened. I mean, SOLE spread around the country. You went to more and more remote places. Then you figured out the need for contact with the Granny Cloud, and you actually ended up creating a Spanish Granny Cloud. But that brings up a question in my mind, which is that after all these years have passed, what do the teachers, parents, and the children think of all this? What do they feel? So two questions. One is, what do the teachers, parents, and children think about it? And secondly, how do you know that this is what they think?
Well, my quick answer is children think it's awesome. And they always say it. And the way we know it is because they tell us, no, this is totally different to what I do in my classroom, first. When it's in a public space, it's really awesome because it's very different than going to that public space and watching your friends get into their Facebook, watching someone play a video game on the computer and just waiting for your turn. No, this is something in which everybody's engaged. So I think, quick answer, children think it's awesome. But Belen, you go first.
I think there's something with your earphones that doesn't. Yes.
Okay.
Something
Like this better?
Maybe.
Okay.
What I was going to say is that in my experience as a granny, I think that every participant in a SOLE really enjoys the experience of doing something different. It means to me that children think they are playing. They ask many questions when there's a granny. They are very interested in who is accompanying them in the SOLE, and they want to talk about everything they find. When you ask them if they liked doing it, they simply say yes. They're no big fuss. But however, during the session, you see them enjoying themselves. They talk, they run from one side to another one. They laugh, they take turns, they spontaneously take and give turns. They interact with joy and dedication and with everybody in the session. So it seems that they are really enjoying it.
Yeah, Sugata.
I was going to say that what do their parents feel about this, and what do the teachers feel about it?
So that's a trick one. So with the teachers, the answer is depends. There's some who get it and some who don't. The ones who get it, so for example, we have a teacher who's called Maria Baiter, and she's a teacher in Cartagena. She's been doing SOLE since 2015, no? Since the first time we scaled it. And it's amazing what she does, no? She's been using it as a way of getting kids engaged with what we call citizenship, civic competencies, whatever. And basically what she wants her kids is to be active, to be participant. And she started doing it with her kids in 2015. She's teacher like to the last grades, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. And what happened with her kids is that her kids started demanding from the other teachers that they learn as they did with Maria. So she ended up teaching all the teachers at her school, and the school in general started doing much better, both academically, but also in terms of self-esteem of the kids and their level of participation and all that. And they decided to do a report to give to the Secretariat of Education of Cartagena saying, look, this works, you should put this in all schools, no? This is something very important. So you have teachers like Maria, no? And you have another one like Julio Cesar in Santander. He does it, and he has only one computer, no? And he gets all the kids to work together on one computer. They take turns and whatever. And so he sees what this creates in the kids and them being able to be engaged in the experience. And I think they think it's wonderful. Other teachers think it's messy, no? Other teachers don't get it. It's like, but wait, I'm not teaching them. How do I know what they're finding out? And that's interesting because all those questions of why this is wrong and all that, that's where we come in to be the ones who kind of stop those teachers and say, let them do it and you'll see what happens. And usually for them, there's a skepticism, which if they iterate it, if they do it again, they finally end up being convinced. The problem is they don't know how to put that together with what the system obliges them to do. No? So they have to teach certain classes, they have to teach certain courses. Yeah, Sugata.
Yeah, I was expecting that because I get similar reaction from teachers in other countries as well. And the last part of my question, which is, what do the parents think about it? Have you spoken with the parents?
So we've not only spoken with parents, but we've also done this with whole communities. So parents, some parents here tend to be very sort of like, education is the problem of the teachers, not ours, no? And then there are parents who are very into the education of their kids. So there are even some that do homeschooling. So the homeschoolers, for example, use SOLE because they want to use it to bring their kids together with other homeschoolers and do it. And they love it because it's like, okay, these kids are researching on their own, but they're researching in groups, which is a very powerful experience. Other parents say, wow, this is tough, no? And I can say this about my parents. They're like, wait, but do you really learn like this? And is this really a way to learn? And so I do think there's a huge range of experiences in parents in seeing what happens. And probably that's why we started saying, hey, maybe we should put SOLE into organizations and into companies and stuff like that. Because if adults are doing SOLEs in their workplaces, no, doing SOLEs in their workplaces, maybe they're going to be more allowing and more interested that their kids do it at school. I think that's the whole system behind it. But what I have seen is that many adults which are out of the educational system see it very powerfully. So we've worked with like indigenous communities in the northern part of Colombia, and they use it a lot because they use it as a strategy to preserve their culture. No, so the kids want to do video games and want to do animations, and the big questions that they do are around how to do that, and they always end up realizing that they need stories or something like that. And so they say, where do you get stories? Well, ask the elders. And that's how the elders get involved. And so what is interesting of how we've done it here, being in public spaces, is that you have very different experiences of learning. And it's learning for different purposes. More than anything, for learning for people to solve their real life problems and to do stuff like that. So I feel that there's a very different range of adults, not only parents, teachers, but there's like all these other groups of people who also are in lifelong learning also. Go ahead, Sugata.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. I mean, because it quite accurately reflects what I see elsewhere as well. But I have one comment about it. I think what you said, one of the sentences you said, is because that the interest in the soul depends on the purpose that the parent or the teacher sees of it. If that purpose is a standardized school examination where the internet is not allowed, then they will say this is a waste of time. Ultimately, my son, my daughter, my student has to clear that exam. And I understand that the soul is very, very good, but it's not healthy. So I've been sort of trying to say that to governments, that suppose an examination question said that find out on the internet and write down your answer, then the same parents and teachers will start to encourage their children to say, now you must learn how to do that properly. So that's one stumbling block in the whole thing. The second comment before I just stop on this question is, do the parents see value in it? Okay, in the sense that in my experiments in India, in the school in the cloud experiments, I found that if you stop the funding, the same parents who used to say that, you know, it's wonderful, will not pay. Why not? Because is it going to help my child to do well in his examinations? No. So then, you know, what should I pay for? Was there any value? I started looking. And what I found was that the only value that the parents saw, the only value, was the granny cloud. Because that was an experience which they could not have got. And they obviously felt that there's some value to it. It's another matter, but they still didn't pay for it. So, so what I found in those experiments is, if you build a school, a soul environment inside a school, it will last. Okay, because the school has funding to keep it going. If you build it inside the community and hope that after your funding is over, they will continue to run it, at least in my experience, it does not happen. So it's an important lesson that I've learned. Go to the schools and go to the government. But this whole idea of why did they see value in the granny cloud, I'm going to leave that with Suneeta.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I was going to ask Belen and Sanjay about exactly that why would you still want to have the grannies around when you're tweaking the soul in so many different ways, and it seems to work. But before you get to that, I think just to add on to what Sugata just mentioned, two different examples at this moment that I can see, and that have been amongst the longest lasting Granny Cloud centers. One which began in 2011, 2012 in a community, because the person who chose to run it believed very strongly in it. And that's one of the centers that has continued without a break whatsoever. The children actually go to different schools and they come to this center, for their sessions with the grannies. And then another example, of course, is where it's inside a school, and the school itself also sees the value in it. And what the parents in many cases have said, the one value that they see in it, of course, is to do with the fact that the children are quite obviously learning a language that they don't seem to learn as well sometimes in the classroom. But there are obviously other takeaways from the Granny Club that I've seen. And I wonder whether that's one of the reasons why, despite having really good people who are doing so many different kinds of tweaks with the souls to be able to do it in all these different kinds of places, why would you still want to have specifically the grannies connecting with the children?
Can I say, Belen? I have to say something very, very powerful. So in 2019, I remember back then, we thought that there's a problem, at least here in Colombia, is people here don't know how to talk to each other. We don't know how to talk to each other. We don't know how to listen. We don't know how to. And so I remember back then with my colleague, with Mariam, that you guys all remember, we were speaking about how do we get people to talk in Colombia? Because basically, yes, learning, cool, but everybody learns, and everybody's kind of worried about doing the exam and being able to make money and whatever. But people don't talk to each other, and that was a big thing. So one of the tweaks that we did was actually starting to use SOLE as a tool to create dialogue. And in 2020, the UN turned 75, and they had this big event which is called UN 75, where the Secretary General wanted to have a worldwide dialogue about what kind of a future do we want to create. And here in Colombia, the UN approached us and said, hey, you guys have a methodology like for having conversation, which is the SOLE, the self-organized learning environment, and you have a community of people throughout the country, no? So can you help us create these dialogues? And what was interesting about that was that we invited people to use SOLEs to have dialogue. And grannies played a very important role in that, because grannies had the power of allowing people to sort of let themselves go, because grannies came and made everything feel relaxed. And we had many through video calls, and so everybody was like, okay, what do we do? And we were like, okay, we have a question. Anybody can suggest a question. And so there were questions about the future, no? And questions about the future which had local context, questions about the future which were like big things, no? Climate change and health and gender and education. And it was very interesting, because there's where we realized that SOLE can work for different types of informed conversation. And that's something which is very difficult to have here in Colombia. And the whole idea of working in small groups to find answers to questions and then sharing them with a larger group allowed for everybody to have a voice. And I think that's what was very powerful. And grannies played a huge role in letting everybody have a voice, in letting everybody have a say, because it was like somebody outside of your group of people, not somebody who's a foreigner or something like that, who allows you to speak further and go out of this group. And that's where I think, and going back to your question, Sugata, that's a place where I saw adults value this power, the power of SOLE, in the power that it allows everybody to participate actively in having a voice to answer a question. And it also allows to ask those really tough questions, not to ask those questions. No, one thing is to figure out why the sky is blue, but another one is to figure out what do we do here regarding the violence that we're living, or what do we do here regarding the deforestation. No, those are the big questions which everybody has there, and suddenly we were putting out there a possibility of having this conversation. So I'm going to stop there, but I'm saying this really opens a very big possibility of other things that can be done and can be taken further in terms of self-organized learning.
Well, I mean, that was very clear, and I'm getting really interested in where we are heading with this conversation, because what we see from your experience and from both of ours seems to converge to a couple of things. Firstly, everybody likes the SOLE. Nobody says I don't like it. Okay, whoever they are. That's number one. Number two is, having said I like it, They still continue to say, but I don't know if I should pay for it. I don't know if I should pay for it. What is the need for it? When the granny cloud steps in, then that opinion is softened a little bit. Say, okay, I see one value in this. This whole idea of learning a new language, meeting somebody from not in your country, perhaps, etc. So the value starts to increase, but still not enough for it to be self-sustaining unless it's inside a school. So yes, a SOLE will work well inside a school. It will continue to operate. If you have the granny cloud in it, then parents and teachers will see a certain value in it. But that brings me to a question. If we know all this, what, if anything, does the government think about this? Do they know about it? Have they any opinions about it? And the most important question, are they likely to do anything about it?
Question. Super easy. So I think it's very interesting because we've worked with the government since we started. And if you see, I can't say what the government in general thinks about SOLE. I can talk about the people in government, and that's what surprises me. I think Colombia is one of the few places around the world where SOLE has been done with the government, and I think that's very powerful. And what I see is that people in the government see it as a powerful innovation, a chance for people to connect, to ask questions. Basically, they want people to learn how to use the internet. Why they would pay for that? Well, that's why they've created all these public spaces, So it's like, okay, if you're not going to pay, at least here you have access, and we're going to get you to do that. And I see that that's where they saw the power of using the internet as like a force for good, not for dialogue, for learning, for building peace, for creating equal opportunities for people to get empowered. It's like, I'm not going to solve your problems, and I should, I'm the government, but at least I'm going to give you a tool for you to maybe start an entrepreneurship, for you to learn about something which you can then sell, etc., etc. And what I feel is that we have always worked with the government, with the sectors which do not have to do with education. We've worked with the culture sector, we've worked with the ICT sector, we've worked with the science and technology and innovation sector, and with the peace building sector, which is interesting because all these have seen the value in getting people together to learn how to learn in groups, in public spaces. But then it's interesting. So you always say the natural places in schools, but I also feel, for example, public libraries are the natural place. So people do go to public libraries to connect to grannies, to connect, to answer big questions. But the interesting thing about it is that we've never been able to manage with the education sector. Like the education sector is the one that has to present exams. Those are the ones who are worried about that kind of structure. And so the government, and so these people in government have really taken this as like innovations to sort of perturb the system. And many of them are concerned on productivity, on making money, and how this empowers people, how the internet empowers people financially. And what we say is basically this is helping people to learn how to work in groups. If you can't solve problems alone, it's much easier if you do it in groups. And that's where the power of this comes. But what I also feel is in the education sector, I think we're stuck. Like the education sector is stuck with all the things it has to do. Actually, this year we did a whole conversation about how the new school should be during and after the pandemic, because this has been a moment of shaking us all. And it was interesting because all the conclusions which we came to pointed towards self-organized learning as a very powerful tool in education. And we spoke to parents, we talked to principals, we talked to organizations, to teachers, to students, everything. And everybody kind of pointed it that way, but that way has like the big problem. How do you want to pay for this? This should be free because anyway you're not paying as a teacher. These kids are just using the internet. So that's where I feel the education sector is like doesn't know how to jump that hurdle. It's like there's a mind model which leaves them stuck. Yeah, Sugata, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I think we can all see, and I can see from your comments on the side as well, that people will accept the system, and governments will also accept a change in the system if we are able to change the method of assessment, if we are able to change the examination. I started suggesting this many years ago, but why did governments not listen? I think the first suggestion I made in this was as far back as 2010 in Melbourne. Everybody applauded, but very few actually acted on it, particularly within the government. And the same story is here in England, in India, in Latin America. Why not? Because we have an old entrenched system that works for better or worse. The end of school, big examination, you sit there alone, you give your exam, you get your scores, and the government's job is done. You are educated. To change that is very risky for democratic governments. What if the parents say, we don't want this new system, you cannot experiment with our children, my child should be examined and educated the way I was examined and educated. Okay, so they're worried about a backlash from their electorate. Secondly, if they do want to change it, what should they change it to? So I started suggesting that they should allow the use of the internet during the public government examination. And everybody thought it was a joke because they said, you're saying children can cheat? And I said, yes. So if you did, what do you think would happen? And it started with people saying everybody will get 100 out of 100 in everything. And I said, do we know that? And I just need to tell you this is for the first time, possibly on the public internet. The government of Israel has actually tried the experiment just a few months ago. I was involved with that. The results have come in. We've analyzed it. We're writing it all up. So I can't tell you anything very much more than that, except to say what was the most generalized result that we found. It can be summarized in one little sentence. It's no big deal. The change in scores is less than 10%. The change in rankings, who is good and who is not so good, doesn't change at all. Okay, and this is over a sample of 700 children, okay, across different schools in 7 different subjects. So that's about all. So watch out for that paper. I'll put it on the internet if and when an editor accepts it.
The question is, what does that say about this? And I'm asking you this because one of the big reasons why we do this here is because basically we're worried that rich kids get rich education, poor kids get poor education. It's like we thought and we think, if you have the internet, maybe these things can equal out. No, maybe everybody could be accessing a new possibility of being stuck where
some of that happens. But what is comforting, hopefully it will be comforting to the government and to the parents. The good children continue to perform better. The poorer children, poorer not in monetary sense, but poorer meaning who have different learning abilities, they tend to score lower, which is what the whole examination system is all about. So that is not disturbed by allowing the internet in. So if you did allow the internet in, if you are a teacher, you will teach differently, obviously. You will teach your children how to search properly. You will encourage them to meet the granny cloud as often as they can. You will test for their comprehension, their communication abilities, and so on and so forth. And as far as the government is concerned, you will know that it's not going to affect the results. So we have the first glimmerings of light, but the question is that where do we go next? Which is what I think Suneeta wanted to ask.
Yes, no, because you're going to need support to take your ideas further, and hopefully in other places for people to take their ideas further. So so what kind of support are you going to need, and where are you going to be headed?
Belen, that's yours.
What we really want is to take SOLE to the most remote corners in Colombia and in the world. That's our dream. We dream of schools of all kinds working in SOLE in their classrooms, teachers, parents, and communities involved, everybody participating with the children and acquiring new knowledge to the projects they want to develop as a community, looking for the resources they need and everybody collaborating. Children showing their parents how to use SOLE, doing SOLE at home, I don't know, to prepare food or to do a small repair at home or start a family business, all making the things they need happen. Doing it with their friends, adults doing it at their workspaces. And what do we need? First, to be able to keep the organization afloat. We need financial resources to be able to continue spreading and spending time designing projects, inventing new ways of doing SOLE and offering SOLE. So we need people and organizations that want to support us or hire our services on a recurrent basis. That's what we need.
Yeah, basically
yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just like basically we need like back then in the medieval times when the Medicis were supporting Michelangelo and Leonardo and whatever. No, we need our benefactor who allow us to. We do experiments basically, no, and we try to do large scale experiments to see what happens, no, in a system when you do something big. Basically, what we're trying to do is do that. Actually, today we're doing a crowdfunding campaign on our platform Global Giving, where we're trying to get people engaged with this idea of what we're trying to do next. Next year, we're trying to go and meet, take SOLE to 15 communities in areas most affected by armed conflict, where maybe they even didn't even have an internet. They're going to have a little bit of internet, a few devices. What if they do that? So what we're going to try and do is we're trying to raise money, but we're also trying to raise awareness. We're also trying to create a network, people who networking together to make this happen. So we would love to have one huge benefactor, no one rich Silicon Valley guy or gal who has a lot of money and says, okay, you just take this and do whatever you think is interesting. And we have interesting things to do. But it can also be a crowd of people. So all of you who are on the call today, we would love if you could help us to get your networks involved in this and we do believe that conversation is a good way of getting this thing going. It's like if we start talking about it, things will start happening. And I think that's where we will drive action to do things. So we're not expecting to be able to do everything. We can do what we know, but I think if we're working together, we will definitely change the world. So that's our stance and our stage. Go ahead, Sugata. And
yeah, I can understand and appreciate where you're coming from, that obviously to take the next step forward to answer Suneeta's question, what will you do next? Obviously is we need money. Okay, but that is taken for granted. That's taken for granted. Okay, so if you don't have money, you can't do anything. So we'll find the money from somewhere. I'm sure you'll find the money from somewhere. But we've got all these people listening. Hopefully, they will give you suggestions about where to go. Provided, my last question: if you did have the means, if you did have the money, what is the one thing that you would do which will change education in Colombia? One thing.
Belén. It's like easy.
I think the most important thing to change in the system is to give people the power and the responsibility to learn. Stop thinking that the state or the government or PISA or Finland are the ones which have to provide, guide, and control. It's trusting that human beings are designed to learn, and that we have the tools to find the information we need and to generate the solutions to the problems we have or that arise. It's what life has been doing since its appearance in the planet, so it's nothing more than that.
You see, Sugata, you say, what's the one thing? And that's like super mean because it's like, I don't know. We don't know. We don't know what's that one thing. If we knew it, we would be doing it. We think the one thing is spreading soul, but we also think it's not because of spreading soul in itself. It's because I think what we want to do is kind of let go of control, no? Allow people, and especially kids, I think, to live without fear, no? To live freely, to be able to choose and navigate and all that. So I think one starting point for us and would be, so we started this conversation about changing the assessment system here. Thanks to you, this is your fault. And we started it, and we started it this year, and it's very, very interesting. Last week we actually had a webinar with a couple of influential people, digitally influential people online here in Colombia, talking about this. And it's interesting because the conversation really takes you to many places. But I think one thing that happened with education is it got really complicated. No, too many things to do, too many things. And I think one part is sort of simplifying education, no? More about letting learners ask questions and work in the internet. And what if you just do that for now and not do all the rest? Not have to do all the, no, you have to do competencies and blah, 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 blah. And you have to cover math, science, and algebra. And no, what if you start just by doing that and letting things happen? And I think that's what we're aiming to do.
No, I'm glad you got to that, because that is, I was hoping that you would come to that. It's an attitudinal change that you're looking at. That's all. Okay, that comes first, an attitudinal change. How do you explain that to people? Well, I can only end with something which is which I heard recently and which kind of stuck in my mind. And you know, Belen mentioned about cooking a little while ago. So you know, if you were to ask a child, what do you need to bake a cake? We have to explain to the world that the answer to that question has changed from what it used to be, which is, I need flour, I need an oven, I need some butter. It has changed. What do you need to bake a cake? First answer, and a connected iPad. The rest follows.
Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do. No, I think all we do here is try to convince people. We're like, I don't know, we're like cheerleaders. We're like, go for it. You can do it. Try something different. No, and I think you both have inspired us tremendously to do that, because you were the ones who convinced us that we could try something different. We could test something different. I love it because with Belen made us think about what was our why. No, why do we do what we do? And I think one of the big reasons why we do what we do is because we're trying to challenge the system. No, and we're trying to challenge it by making people not be afraid. And I think the reason why we're stuck where we're stuck is because we're afraid. We're afraid of trying new things. We're afraid of testing it. And I can admit here in Colombia, it's easy to be afraid. But I think it happens generally in the rest of the world. We're afraid of trying to change one thing quickly, one quick thing. And I think what we try to do generally is to tell people, it's okay. I'm here. I'm behind you. I don't know if that's going to work, but if something goes wrong, we're here. We're here to help each other. And I think that's what we all just need to do. So, yeah, I think our challenge is how to get people convinced to try something different and to try it patiently, no, not to just do it and it didn't work. Okay, no, I'm going to go back to what works. No, try it and be persistent and and put the energy and drive to make it possible. I think that's where we would go. So having said that, thank you so much. I would like to open the floor now to anybody who's here in this call. Several of you have joined only using your headphones. So if you want to ask questions, you can write them in the chat, or whoever wants to turn on their camera, you can also ask questions on the camera. I'm still without electricity here, so my battery might die out, so I'm going to have to connect from the phone eventually. But we're happy to receive questions from all of you who have joined us today in this call. And I don't know if we have questions from the Facebook live session, which you want to share here, please feel free to join us. So for now, for those of you who need to leave, that's perfectly fine. For those of you who would like to join this conversation and continue asking questions, please feel free to do so. You can turn on your mics, you can turn on your cameras, you can come on screen. All of you who you can do that, at the bottom of the screen, you can find your little camera and your mic button, so you can turn those on. And please feel free to ask away. Before we do that, I want to thank Suneeta and Sugata so much for this. I'm curious to know if you liked doing this. And there I see Goran on the screen. So Goran, for you to be able to ask out loud, you have to go to the bottom of the screen where the little telephone is and click leave audio and then join audio again and choose the microphones if you want to speak out loud. Thank you, Christina, for connecting. So my last question for Suneeta and Sugata is, what did you guys think of this interview today?
Well,
Great fun. No answers to be given.
well, no, I think first of all, it was a good idea to organize it because as opposed to what we would do normally, which is that we would do all the talking and people would do the listening. But here we were asking the questions to you, who are the actual practitioners, and trying to zoom in on what is the central issue and what should we do about it. So it was very enjoyable, and thanks for organizing it.
Thank you, Sugata. And you, Suneeta?
It was lovely, very relaxing, not to have to come up with hopefully some kind of bright idea that would be genuinely helpful. And of course, it's great to be able to kind of get a sense of that whole journey, which fortunately you've been giving me every so often bits and pieces of it, but to see it all together, that was really, really nice. Thank you.
All right, so sorry, I'm doing feedback. Whoever wants to ask a question, please feel free. Sorry, I'm going to put on those headphones here. Sorry, my battery's good. I'm going to be disconnected from the computer in a few seconds. So anyway, do we have any questions from the people who are here joining us? Or anybody who wants to comment or anybody who wants to say anything? Hello, Juan Pablo. Go ahead, Juan Pablo. So nice to see you. Juan Pablo, we can't hear you.
We can't hear.
I just said thank you to every one of you naming you, but I'm not going to repeat that because time is of the essence, right? So thank you. Very good conversation. Just a question to Sanjay and Belen, and I think if others want to supplement, but Sanjay, my understanding is that SOLE in Colombia has been very active in post-conflict and the peace transition process. So just to understand, because my understanding is from Sugata and Suneeta's experience. The experience is more with children, in the first decade or maybe the early second decade. But you have experienced this with adults, young adults that have been, child soldiers at some point, and then young adults on the other end, and as they are facing the new civil life and hopefully a peaceful transition. So I'm just interested in the way the conversation emerges. How important is it or it isn't to have internet connection to start these conversations? Or if internet is just sort of an excuse, like a Trojan horse, to start a conversation that does not need information that is on the internet, because you're engaging in a different type of dialogue. So I just have that conversation, just thinking of the model, how important is internet when you're engaging in that type of conversation that is not necessarily about concrete knowledge?
So very, very good question, Juan Pablo. Awesome question. Look, so I'm going to be really honest. Two of the people who are here, which is Belen and Suneeta, were the first people to connect remotely to these with a group of kids and ex-combatants in an area where where they had settled thanks to the peace agreement, right? And so I'm going to talk quickly about the internet without the granny cloud, but actually Belen and Suneeta were grannies connected to those sessions. The power of using the internet is the device, how the device attracts people to work together. And I do think that having a computer where you have something in there, no, where it's not just let's talk about our opinions and whatever, and let's talk about what we know, but actually saying, okay, well, what you're saying, let's go and ask and see what other people say. And so really having the internet is this powerful thing of being able to talk to 4 billion people around the world, give or take. And that's having voices of other people. And so being able to find people who think like you, people who think different to you, to find answers which really allow for you to be able to say, not only the one who has the power is the one who says what the truth is, but we could be building the truth together. And I think that's the power of the internet, that when somebody says, well, this is the truth, towards your question, I'm guessing in military structures that's very intense. For ex-combatants, for people in these areas, having the possibility of
We lost him.
Infrastructure constraints, as always. But over to you, Belen and Suneeta, because I understand that you two
At a critical
engaged in
moment.
that.
Now we have him here. Sanjay, we can hear you.
now, yes?
Now.
Okay, sorry. So just to finish the story quickly, because I think Belen and Suneeta have more to say about this. When you think about the fact that people have sources of information, the possibility of finding other voices different to the ones that their hierarchy has always shown them, I think that's very liberating, because it allows people to really question things which they had in mind and allow them to do those questions. So really, I think the power of the internet is the power of asking questions and not being stuck to whoever tells you what it is to do. I also think, but Belen and Suneeta connected as grannies, and I think there's also a very big part of it. So go ahead.
Suneeta, please tell us.
No, just very, very briefly, but I think some of those earliest sessions that we had in those very, very remote locations in Colombia, I think the important bit was that there were possibilities of different voices, and creating a platform where all those voices would genuinely be heard. I think that was what was the key to it all. It's a starting point, but and if it keeps done over and over again, then even more voices emerge. And when we're talking about that kind of a conflict situation, which unfortunately is in so many parts of the world in different ways, it becomes that much more important, because there's no one response to any kind of situation. And I think that's also to some extent what happens in even regular granny sessions where there is no conflict. Just to be able to encourage different children to have their own opinion. So it kind of cuts across from very grave, grim situations to very light-hearted ones as well. But to know that you have your voice and that you're free to share it.
Thank you.
And also I think that the granny inside the session gives the whole energy of the session. It's like loving and fun, so it's people feels confident to talk and confident to speak of whatever subject they want to speak. And I always say that grannies are like a fountain in a session. No, people come, look at the bottom, maybe throw something inside, maybe come again, reflect on the edge, take a walk, go back, drink some water, go. It's like a dynamic there that makes people that allows people to be free.
Thank you. And a question, you talk about, of course, like Sugata was saying, we need resources. Like, how do we donate if we're interested? Like, what is the information? Where do you go? You just like Google SOLE Colombia, and you will find a crowdfunding. What's the next step on this Giving Tuesday?
Okay, so in the chat of this video call, you can find a link to our crowdfunding campaign. You can also, that's like doing it if you want to do it through credit cards and stuff like that, but you can also donate straight to us on our website, www.solecolombia.org. You go there to donar, or in Spanish, donar, D-O-N-A. Donna. There you can find all the instructions of other ways of donating to us, and well, that's another way of getting through. More interesting than donations, I do think, Juan Pablo, and for everybody who's here, is we're interested in working together. No, finding we're just a small team of enthusiasts. We're trying to do crazy things, and I think if we try to do them together, that's more interesting. So I do find the possibility of well, our information is there. I'll put my email in the chat, but most of you know a little bit of me or of Belen. So let's, I don't know, we have to figure it out together. So that's another way of finding how we can join our networks to make this possible. Thank you, Juan Pablo.
Can I give a comment?
Go ahead, Goran, please.
Oh, I'm on. Fine. I didn't know how to get the mic on. Okay,
Sorry.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Christina's asking also.
Thank you very much for this wonderful session. I must say, full of so much. And I think, like everybody, I think Sugata said, everybody who hears this likes it. You know, so I think that's not the big point. And why? Well, because it's addresses something deeply profound issues and challenges that we have to have approaches where, so to say, everybody can be given a voice. You know. And we need to have approaches where somebody will be listened to. You know, and these are the two things very much from, you know, fundamentally you're doing. So that's fine. But of course, then it was so interesting to listen to you here when you reflected on what about next step? If people like it, how can we make it be part of a more substantial part of our system? And of course, that's where the problems start. Very much, but I tend to believe very much in the power of powerful examples. That is really the way to transform systems or institutions or societies, but give examples that it can be done another way. And I've been so much seeing that, and I think this is a good example of that. But also have to say that at the same time that even if we have good examples, they doesn't fly off by themselves. You know, it has to be given something more. And I think when Sugata brought in the idea of how the parents see it, the examination system, and really my question is more on referring to similar things. Have you, some of you run into the Sudbury Valley School and high school in America? Sugata seems to know, because my friend Russ Eckhoff, he's not with us anymore, but a very close friend of mine, really a big system thinker. He was deeply involved in that Sudbury Valley School. And as I remember that, they kind of did these things and they turned it around and let the teachers take, you know, a back role and being facilitators. And the kids were really running the learning process. And of course, they met these questions, but okay, it's good, but how can they enter this university? Will they be able to? Do they have the basic, you know? And they did, but still it didn't take off. So, I mean, there's some interesting aspects of that. When we have good examples, we believe it in theory, in practice, but still it doesn't fly. So this is just leaving that question open. I think that was very present of this conversation, and that's why I like it so much. And of course, it's just keep on going and supporting it and building networks. And I've tried to pitch in a little bit here, and I will spread this, and I will do everything I can to somehow open up to other networks as well. You know, so that's my reflection right now.
Thank you so much, Goran. That's really powerful. I think. Well, so I'm an economist, no, and I went to the whole learning system, and I did a degree, and I got a master's, and whatever. And so, in my understanding, the big thing is there's an economic system which sustains the why this doesn't change. No, there's a system which does not allow this to change, or who can incorporate this. And so the question is a big question where it is, what are we willing to put it to sacrifice for a greater good, I think. And I think that's a tough question, especially because we all started in an even sort of initial point. No, so education is just sort of a reflection of those inequalities in the whole system. So I always wonder what it is that we have to do. Like, I always thought it was through education that you changed it, but then I also thought, well, I don't know, maybe education is the one who reproduces it. So I don't know. Thank you, because I do think it's a question which is very big and it's out there.
Yeah, maybe one more reflection on that, Sanja, that when I also hear this, we have now your system, your experience, your SOLE approach, and you see then the educational systems, and I like your way of describing that you work with other parts of government, and I think that's a very good way of doing it. But we should try to avoid maybe get into the this system or the old system. At least that's my experience from my business background. You have to try to integrate into the existing system by getting in there and by showing and demonstrating within that you can. I think when Sugata said you have to bring it into the schools, somehow. It's not to replace everything, because then you will have everybody against you. It has to be coming in there and finding and not the or, adding something to something. At least that's just a personal reflection on how to make these type of systems open up to, because they're scared, of course. They think they're in control. They are not in control, but they think they're in control. They can't let loose the control. Anyway, I think we would agree to that.
Does anybody else want to ask any question or comment? Go ahead, Christina.
No, I would like to thank you very much and everyone here. And just to share a deep feeling that you guys just presented an incredible example and experience of self-organized learning environment. Because, I came to the meeting, like I know you, I don't know Belen, but I said, oh my God, I'm going to hear to Sugata and Sugata is so famous, and Suneeta, and they're gonna, say what they think about SOLE in Colombia, and it was amazing. And I'm a person from learning ever, and still I had this mindset of, what they're going to teach us here, and I'm going to listen, going to learn. And then we started with self-organized, not knowing what was the question and who would ask the question. And I learned incredibly so much in this dialogue. It was amazing. I'm deeply thankful to you.
Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you, Christina.
That's beautiful. We have like 3 more minutes left. Does anybody else want to add anything else or ask anything else? Please feel free to turn on your mics. I don't know, Belen, do we have questions in the chat? I can't see there. But does anybody want to say something else?
And it says we have a question in Facebook from Veronica Ojeda. But I don't know the question. Let me see.
So Veronica is one of our teachers one of the SOLE teachers in Mexico. She's also been a granny to our communities here in Colombia. So Veronica, I don't know if you have a way of sending. You can send it to me through WhatsApp or to Belen. Send your question and we'll try to answer it here, whatever is easier. Belen, if you can check out WhatsApp, because I'm here like on a tiny device.
Don't worry. I'm
okay.
on it.
You're on it.
But we have to. She says, in 2017, UNESCO reported that 50% of children that finished primary school don't count on competencies.
Yeah.
A minimal competencies of reading and mathematics in the world. What do you think about the situation? and taking
You want to say it in Spanish? Say it in Spanish.
yes,
I'll translate.
teniendo en cuenta la pandemia.
Okay. So Veronica's question is, all these kids without competencies in math and reading and writing, and now taking into consideration what the pandemic has done, what do we think? So I think this is a question for everybody. This is not just for you and me, Belen, but maybe you want to throw yourself, and maybe also and Suneeta would like to say something as a closing to our conversation. Belencita, it's your turn.
Well, what we think is that we need to do something on that, because that's why we've been working on 2020 and this year also, because we know that that people more how do you say desfavorecido?
Yeah, vulnerable, or disenfranchised.
Are on a worse place now with this pandemic. So this is what we are working on. I don't know if we are working on those minimal competencies of reading and mathematics, but we will try to work on that and help people who needs it. No, what do you think, Sugata and Suneeta?
Well, I would. It's probably a big topic. It's too long to talk about, but I'll just summarize it into a question to say, what competency are we trying to measure, and how are we planning to measure it? I find, for example, in India, that knowing the 17 times tables is considered a competency. Now, and if you don't know it, then you're less competent than someone who does. We have to realize that this is a competency from another time. This competency is obsolete. So we first have to change the list of competencies. And all I'm saying is that one action, if you said how to search on the internet is a key competency, and if you test for it, the entire system will change.
Yeah.
Look, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think, just to take that forward, reading from a book is not what one is looking at. I mean, if I go back to my early childhood education years experience, you're really talking about being able to read the environment. You're talking about being able to read a face. You're talking about being able to read from all kinds of material, because that's where the comprehension is really coming from. And because of that comprehension, then you're able to take quote unquote appropriate decisions. So it just kind of takes off from there, really.
I would just maybe add something to that, and it's like, I don't know. I think as humanity, we're troubled with so many. No, I have two kids, and I think we're troubled right now with so many things that it's not only about reading and writing and math. No, I think there's a problem of love, or there's a problem of love towards humans and towards non-humans, and how do we take care of ourselves, and how do we take care of this planet? And to be honest, I don't think you need to go sort of in a linear way towards it. It's not like we need to learn how to read and write to be able to love each other, to be able to take care of the planet. No, I don't think it goes like in a progression. So maybe that question makes us wonder what should really be the questions we should be asking ourselves now, no? And which are urgent, and which do we need to deal with right now? No, and I think one is, how do we allow people to do questions? How do we allow people to ask themselves questions and feel free to do them, and try to be able to have somebody to work with together to find the answers to it? So I think maybe the competency doesn't have to do with math and reading, but the competency has to do with asking questions and being able to try and solve them together. And I think maybe that goes before, I don't know what it is that we need to do. Having said that, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I'm very touched, honored. I think I'm going to cry, so I'm not going to cry on screen yet. But I want to thank everybody for having joined us in today's conversation. These conversations are they're like a nuclear bomb inside me. They make me go on and on for a long time. And I really want to thank you all, especially Suneeta and Sugata, for having joined us. But I want to thank Belen and my team, which make this possible. No, we always come up with these crazy ideas and then we make them go on. And then I want to thank all the other 20 something of you who joined us today. Some of you had to leave, some of you have stayed until the end. But to be honest, we're just super grateful, because I think what happens here is basically what needs to be happening. And where this will take us, I don't know, but it sounds very exciting. So I'm very grateful for all of you having joined today. Thank you so much. We're doing this crowdfunding campaign, but that's like the least of it. For me, this is just beautiful, and this is the energy which I think makes the world change. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Feel free to open your mic and say goodbye, turn on your cameras, whatever. I'd love to take a picture, like a screenshot. If Belen can do it, could you all turn on your cameras, the ones who are left here, and we take like a screenshot to say goodbye. And thank you to all for having joined us. I hope you had a nice morning with this talk. I certainly did. So thank you so much, Christina, for joining us. Thank you to everyone who actually was here. I can't see the whole screen with all the cameras, so Belen, you'll have to guide us on this one and say smile, cheese, or whatever.
In India, many of the kids say soul.
I think we need to do that. Let's do that, please. Let's do soul. Okay, are we ready?
1, 2, 3.
Soul. Thank you all very much. We're touched. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely Christmas. Next year, I'm guessing we're going to do many things all together. Thank you, Suneeta, so much for joining. Thank you, Sugata, so much for this. I hope you have a lovely day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you to everybody for joining. Take care.
Bye.
Bells, can you stop the recording, please?
Yes. Casi me quedo sin batería.